This is episode 10 of Finding Rachel, a podcast about a YouTube channel about a documentary film. You got it? Okay, welcome everyone to episode 10 of Finding Rachel. We're into double digits now, which both surprises and deeply concerns me. Anyhow, today, in light of the ongoing chaotic pronouncements of U.S. President Donald Trump, we're going to dedicate the show today to what the Montreal-based journalist Justin Ling has dubbed troll politics. Justin is a freelance journalist and contributor to the Toronto Star, Wired, The Walrus, and Foreign Policy. His newsletter, Bug-Eyed and Shameless, is all about the information war we currently find ourselves in. I've invited Justin onto the podcast today to talk about his recently published article entitled "Nothing is Sincere and Everything Hurts: How Troll Politics Are Setting Up an Unreal Era." Welcome, Justin. Thanks for taking the time out.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Where should we start? Let's just dive right into it. What is troll politics?
Yeah, I mean, I think troll politics is the sort of political ethos we found ourselves in over the last number of years. I don't know that it necessarily began and it certainly won't end with Donald Trump, but he's certainly been kind of the prime vehicle for it. It has been this mentality of many, let's say many trolls to wade into our politics and to play characters, to set up a kind of a sandbox in which they can lie and imagine and make up these grandiose false worlds, to write fan fiction, to build themselves into characters, to make villains of normal people, and to sort of fight this out in this very unreal space. They don't have to believe in what they say. They don't have to believe in the things they allege, as long as it serves a purpose, as long as it serves their end, as long as it really helps advance this particular political project. And there's a lot of different projects at play, but fundamentally, it is this effort to make politics and political space into kayfabe, into fake, into fanfic, into imagination, into kind of expanding the online world, 4chan and the rest, into IRL.
So would you say that this form of politics has been cultivated or amplified by the internet or different platforms on the internet? Is there a relationship you're trying to draw there?
Absolutely. I mean, this couldn't exist without the internet, right? Like there's many different sort of analogies you can draw to this fundamentally unreal politics, and there's a lot that kind of go back through in history, but you can't point to that many that have been kind of successful on a super grand scale. So in the piece I write, I make a couple of analogies. One of them is with Vladimir Putin, of all people, and sort of his own ability to sort of turn himself into a character of the public imagination. And I realize this is a comparison that probably means very little to most people who don't speak Russian, including myself. But basically, there is this character in modern Russian literature. His name is Erast Fendorin, and he's this sort of Sherlock Holmes type figure. Sort of Sherlock Holmes meets James Bond. He solves crimes, he solves murder and political intrigue, and does counter espionage. He practices judo, and he's sort of this epitome of the modern Russian man, post-Soviet, post-communist, self-sufficient, ruggedly, self-reliant, doesn't need to live off the state. It is this sort of archetype of a new Russian man. And there's been some really fascinating things written that kind of describes Vladimir Putin's sort of constant intermingling with this character. The many smart watchers of Russian politics and media have noted Vladimir Putin's sort of willingness to lean into this caricature of himself as this hero from Russian literature. His right down to his love of martial arts, much like Fandor in the books. And there's a really interesting thing there, wherein Vladimir Putin recognizes what the Russian people want. He recognizes a figure that they identify with their sort of collective ambition and desire, and he models himself in what they call self-fashion. He self-fashions himself after this character, and he leans into to kind of take the halo from this character and put it on himself. To slide over and talk about Donald Trump,
Yeah, I was
I
going to
mean,
say because you use that as it's a really interesting introduction. I kind of thought, where is he going with this? But then you turn to Trump and you say, if I can quote from your
mm,
piece, you say Donald Trump is self-fashioning himself to become a beloved figure in the American psyche, and that figure is Donald Trump.
yeah, and I mean, I think it's exactly that. I mean, and I'll give you a left field cultural reference here. There's a Mac Miller song, one of his first big hits, called Donald Trump. And the whole song, it's not really about Donald Trump. It's about the sort of cultural relevance of Donald Trump. And I think like the chorus is, I be on my Donald Trump shit. It's a rap song about being larger than life, about getting that money, about being this master negotiator, being this rugged capitalist of Americana. And it's so funny because years go by, and Mac Miller later kind of says, I'm not doing this song anymore. I'm retiring this thing. What a grotesque thing I did, and what a horrible man that he's become. But to some degree, Donald Trump is trying to play the character from that song. He's trying to play the character he was on The Apprentice. He's trying to be the guy that everyone identifies from, Home Alone 2. And he's been trying to do this his entire career, and his political life is really just an extension of that. And Donald Trump writes about this in his books. He writes about recognizing the sort of cultural cachet he has and trying to exploit it initially for his business dealings, but eventually for his political life. He knows the sort of image that people have of him, and he tries to become it. And if I can send this out even a little bit more, maybe this is something I've been thinking about since I even published the piece, and I think it owes well to what you're talking about here. Um, to some degree, Donald Trump has continued that by recognizing the character that his most sort of dogmatic supporters want him to be. I mean, the people who stuck with Donald Trump through the years, even after he lost power, even after he was vilified for attempting a coup, they wanted him to become a troll, right? They wanted him to become the guy who would come in and destroy DEI and go after trans people and stop with all the pronoun stuff. And they wanted him to sort of become the Pepe the Frog that he was in many of the memes, many of the AI generated art that is percolated online. And he's absolutely fulfilling their wishes in everything he does today.
Mm-hmm. You've made a distinction here between Putin, who's really embraced this fictional character, but Trump, you're suggesting, is almost kind of refashioning a reference to himself, right? Am I getting that right?
I think it's exactly it.
Because a lot of people refer to him kind of as a narcissist, right? Or his critics do. But I kind of wonder what his supporters are seeing there in that self-referentiality, this larger than life figure that is himself.
Yeah, and I don't think sort of megalomania is a sin either in Trump's eyes or the eyes of his supporters. I think so much of his cultural cachet comes from this unapologetic, ambitious, capitalistic, jingoistic, American culture, right? And I don't even say most of that as to denigrate any of it, right? The reality is that I think a lot of Americans, I think particularly white men, I think particularly white young men, have for many years now felt, and I think unreasonably, but have felt like they have been pushed in a corner and shunted aside and made to feel bad about their own cultural history, and I'm really just kind of regurgitating what they themselves say about their current politics,
Hmm.
and they feel as though they don't want to be ashamed anymore. And again, just to keep underlining this, no one's making them feel ashamed. You know, we're doing historiography. Like we're recognizing past wrongs. And I think this is a completely unreal reasonable kind of opinion, but nevertheless, their opinion is we've felt ashamed for too long. We want to feel proud again. And to some degree, Donald Trump represents that in a massive way. He feels like a return to the sort of broad-chested, unapologetic, angry American of the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever era you want to go back to. And I feel like they are very happy to lend to that character their vote, their support, their money, whatever. And he's very happy to play that character for them.
And I think no, that's a wonderful point, because I think that if we just take a narrow definition of trolling, like internet trolling, a lot of it is really focused on the outrageous and provocative remarks, which is to say, there's a large focus, emphasis that's placed upon basically bullshit, right?
Mm.
Bravado. But what you're suggesting, Justin, is that, tell me if I'm getting this right, is that there is an agenda and there is meaning. People, his supporters and others, are invested in a project, right? In an
Yes.
agenda, because this kind of I want to take us to a discussion of kind of what we've been seeing over the last few weeks with all these pronouncements that are coming out, and it seems like a lot of political leaders, including our own here in Canada, are dumbfounded in that they don't know. This is a trope that we hear over and over, whether or not he's serious or not.
Yeah, and I mean, just to start with that first bit,
Mm.
I think the left or liberals, or just let's say the non kind of Trump non-reactionary types, they do think of trolling as being sort of an end unto itself, right? Like when Kamala Harris went up in the debates, and I think she was questioning how rich Trump really is, and she was trying to troll him, right? Like trying to get him mad, trying to get him upset. And it was funny because there was no gain, there was no purpose to it. It was literally trolling in the very narrow sense. It was, I'm trying to get under your skin.
Yeah, and
I'm
also
trying to make you
to get a
angry.
reaction, right?
Exactly,
To
100%.
get a reaction, yeah.
And that's not what Donald Trump's trolling is, right? Donald Trump is trolling, again, to regurgitate what I hear his supporters saying constantly. He's trolling the establishment. He's trolling the status quo. He's trolling politics, the politics that have got us here. Again, in their parlance, here is a terrible dystopia. I happen to think here is pretty good. But when they troll with a purpose, with a plan, with an idea, with an ideology behind it. And I think you can parlay that into where Trump is today. I mean, listen, his attacks on transgender people, let's say, is trolling of the highest order. It is, but it's not really about protecting children. It's about saying to every single person who is non-binary, any single person who uses pronouns in their signature, any single person who doesn't like to hear people use transphobic slurs or whatever. It's saying to them, "We won. Get used to it. Back
Hmm.
off, and we'll do whatever we like to you." Right? Like we're tired of being dictated, by you about what we can say and how we can talk and how we have to think
But
and
it's
what's
no,
appropriate.
I agree with you, but it seems to have gone to another level, right? Almost an imperial level, in the sense
Yeah.
that it's
Well,
not just like get used to it. We control the agenda. It seems to have moved beyond that and surprised a lot of people, to, well, particularly here in Canada, but Greenland and out in Gaza and other places where it's, and we're coming for you almost, right?
Well, and the trolling is also designed to frustrate and confuse and
Yeah.
to shock and awe, to use the language, right? I think Steve Bannon, who I think is probably the single most important person advising and influencing Trump anywhere right now. I don't even know how often they talk. All I know is that everything that Steve Bannon has described about politics is now coming to fruition in a very particular sense. Steve Bannon talks about the need to overwhelm your opponent, to do so much and do so much so quickly that your opponent has no chance to recalibrate, that your opponent is still fighting stuff that you've already forgotten about, so that your opponent delegitimizes themselves in attempting to push back against all the crazy stuff you've thrown out. And maybe some of it's serious, maybe some of it's trolling. So I think when Donald Trump talks about wanting to annex Greenland or invade the Panama Canal or make Canada the 51st state, listen, part of that is him playing the character from The Art of the Deal. Part of that is him coming out and saying, all bets are off. I have no scruples. I'm willing to do whatever to get a good deal. So you better make me a good offer. But part of it too is to force people to fight ghosts, right? Like the actual plausibility or practicality or even interest he has in annexing Canada, I think is next to zero. But the more he throws it out, the more Canadians and Democrats and everybody else are running around trying to defend against the thing that's frankly never going to happen. But what does he want to do? Well, I think he actually does want to tariff Canadian imports. I think he actually does, want to rip up or at least severely alter the free trade agreement. I think he does want to onshore a bunch of, let's say, auto manufacturing that currently takes place in Windsor. I think that is the goal, and I think the trolling in that sense is a very clear objective, and I think frankly it's working pretty well for him.
Yeah. So to that end, how would you effectively respond to the troll, or how would you engage in troll politics to respond to that kind of obfuscation, that kind of tsunami, this overwhelming of fact of fiction? Like how do you, because it seems to be, again, coming back to what I was saying before, that we have a bunch of folks here, leaders, who are a bit dumbfounded. How do you take it seriously? How do you respond to it? It's because it
Yeah,
seems to me as though if you take it, there is a taking it too seriously,
yeah,
right? Which
that's
is
right.
fueling the Trump agenda, right? The attention on him.
The short answer is that there is no great response to this, right? I mean, this Donald Trump has control of both houses of Congress. Even so-called moderates like Susan Collins have shown the limits of their moderation. They're voting to confirm every nominee he puts forward, no matter how manifestly unqualified or completely deranged they are. So I think the extent of his power and the extent to which he's willing to overreach on his constitutional limits shows that there really is no checks and balances here. So for starters, he can control as much as he wants, and he has the full weight of the U.S. government, as well as the richest man on the planet, as well as one of the world's biggest social media platforms, so on and so on. He has a lot of power behind him, so there's no real great defense. I think if you're Canada, if you're Europe, if you're Australia, whatever, you need to start figuring out how to respond to everything, not each individual thing, right? I mean, there's sort of two things that have to happen. There has to be resiliency, and there has to be a cost imposition on America, right? So resiliency means strengthening ties between all non-American nations of the liberal order. It means creating redundancy systems so that if America pulls out or starts screwing with the mechanics of international organizations or alliances, that you can carry on without them. But also, it means that once America starts this trolling, this geopolitical or economic trolling, whether that's imposing tariffs, whether that's trying to rig NATO to do whatever, it means putting costs on America for doing that, whether that's retaliatory tariffs, whether that's non tariff barriers, whether that's sanctions, or whether it's removing them. I don't mean economic sanctions. I mean sanction at some of these organizations. But whatever it looks like, showing Americans that there is a consequence for this trolling, not each individual threat or idea, but just for the general unreliability of having America as a nominal ally. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think when you swing at every individual pitch, it helps Trump and his allies delegitimize you. You
Yeah.
know, there's this incredible interview. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. It's Jesse Waters, the guy who kind of takes over for Tucker Carlson on Fox News. He has on Doug Ford a few weeks ago, as Trump first starts floating this idea of making Canada the 51st state, and so the Premier of Ontario is on this show, and Doug Ford is on there to make this sort of rah rah Canada pitch. We're your best friend, we're your closest ally. We make stuff together. We have all of these supply chains. He's making a perfectly coherent and thoughtful and reasonable point. But Jesse Waters is there saying, "Well, I'm a little offended. Why don't you want to be part of America? What's so bad about America? We can give you the best stuff. Why wouldn't you want to be here? And frankly, I'm a
You
little
don't
offended
like
that you
us.
keep saying this."
Yeah.
And what's really wild about this, I actually included the clip in the newsletter. What's wild about this is that Jesse Waters is trolling you. He's trolling every one of his viewers. There's a little parts where he's sort of cracking a smile, and you could tell that he's doing this as a bit. But he's a news anchor, right? Like literally, we have a nominal news anchor who is fine. He's in the style of Tucker Carlson, but he's letting you know with a little wink and a smile, "I'm trolling you. I'm trolling you on behalf of the president. The president's trolling you too. We don't really want to have genuine conversations. We just want to screw with you." And there's something so unreal about that that I
Well,
think
I
we've
think
got so
there's
used
it's
to
more,
it. Yeah.
but isn't it more than just an unreality that's going on? There is a danger here, right? That yes, some people may see the wink, others may see something else in that
Right.
conversation, which is, wow, why they don't really like us up there in Canada, right?
Yeah.
I think that there is I think the real danger going forward, my opinion, is that there is a cultivation of opinion, like a pretty wacky opinion about Canadians being a danger to North America, to the United States. So yes, there is a wink, but there is a dark side to that wink as well, which is buying into the actual content of what is being espoused in that conversation and many others.
Yeah, and like, forgive me for going a little wide with this, but there
Yeah.
is something kind of fundamentally unnerving about this because, okay, yes, it's trolling, but it's also earnest. Because if you ever actually tried to hold anyone account for this, and people have tried to do to Trump at various gaggles over the last little while, they'll just say it's true. They're trolling. Okay, yes, they kind of acknowledge they're trolling with their wink and their smile. But if you sort of push them and say, "Surely you don't mean this. Surely you don't intend on annexing, our closest ally," and they say, "No, no, we mean it. We mean it, and this is what we're going for, and we expect kind of a serious response." So it's this sort of Schrodinger's cat of a policy. It is both earnest and a troll at the same time. You can't actually take it too seriously because if you do, they will make fun of you and they will delegitimize you and they will say, "Well, look at these idiots. They thought we were being serious." But if you don't take it seriously, they keep saying, "No, no, we intend to do it. We're gonna do things that will make it happen." So they're forcing you to play offense and defense at the same time. They're forcing you to engage and not engage at the same time.
I
And
don't
this,
know.
yeah,
Justin, you've been on the Hill. You've been in how many scrums have you been in?
a million,
Dealing
1 million. Yeah.
with very skilled communicators, and when I mean very skilled communicators and politicians in particular, is they're trained, highly trained, to avoid answering questions. Yet, what we seem to have here is uh, Canadian and other politicians being put on not being put on the defensive, and it seems like they lose in their ability to not answer a question, right, or to sidestep a question.
Yeah.
They always feel as though they need to answer these troll setups, which I find to be stunning.
The solution, part of the solution to this, and let me do this kind of backwards for a second, but
Mhm.
part of the solution to this is earnestness. I will unpack that in a second, but let me just point out that this troll politics, that the way Trump engages with this, gives his supporters permission to field any sort of idea, policy, or position under the sun within the range of sort of earnestness and trolling. Right? There are prominent Republicans on Twitter saying, "Well, what does Canada actually produce for us? We can totally cut off all of their imports. We don't need them." There are others who are on Twitter saying, "Well, of course we need their natural resources in the north. Of course we need their critical minerals. They're too important not to annex." all of these things are both official policy and not official policy. Everything is true, nothing is true, right? This is, I mean, this is very Russian. This is very Soviet dialectic. Um, but what it also does is sort of creates this chaos and this cynicism and this vacuousness about politics that everyone thinks is true and now is becoming true to the logical conclusion. People for years, part of the reason people vote for Trump is because no one means what they say, no one says what they mean, everything is fake, nothing is real. At least Donald Trump speaks frankly and directly, right?
Yep.
One of the core things about why Americans support Donald Trump, put aside all of the policies, put aside the deportations and the racism, everything else. One of the core reasons why Americans support Donald Trump is because they listen to him speak and they think, my God, I have never heard anyone in politics speak so unvarnishedly, so earnestly, so genuinely in all my time. Now, of course, this is all fake. Donald Trump doesn't mean anything he says, but he says it in such a way that it sounds convincing. And there's really few others who do this effectively. Bernie Sanders is probably the other one. But that is really powerful. And nobody in the sort of grand liberal order has figured this out yet. But it is part of the solution. Your ability to answer a question, not with talking points, not with complete pablum, not with condescending head patting, but with just genuine humanity and earnest human speak, I think, is the key to combating populism and extremism, to eventually beating Donald Trump, and if and when he runs again, or whether it's his son or daughter who runs, whatever. Being able to talk to people like they are adults, like you understand what they're saying, like you understand their concerns, and like you have a clear, coherent idea on how to fix those things, I think is primordial. And nobody is doing this. Justin Trudeau does not do it. His competitors, those who seek to replace him, Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, do not do it. Kamala Harris did not do it. Very, very few people in politics do this. Pierre Poilievre does this quite well. And I think Nigel Farage does this. Those the AFD do this. Populists know how to talk to people because they engage with people. Donald Trump knows how to talk to people. The liberals in the Western world do not know how to do this, and until they figure it out, they're going to keep getting trolled and destroyed.
Well, that's a great place to maybe wrap up. Justin, thanks so much. Justin Ling, again, thanks so much for all your insights into troll politics and the future. Oh, wow. That's ahead of us, I guess. Yeah.
Thanks for having
me. Yes, they knew I'd be standing naked, and with the old duds now gone, I can come clean. This was not an ode to clothes or prose that's sacred. Babe, this whole thing was just a dirty trick to make you think of me naked. Seriously, though. Call me.